Erev Tov, Erev Tov. We are going to start with Shulchan Aruch tonight, and I feel like there's some ground we have to cover in Shulchan Aruch, and we haven't been getting through it, so let's take tonight to get through some more ground of Shulchan Aruch, B'ezrat Hashem, and then we will be able to continue as usual on Monday night, B'ezrat Hashem. So, before I begin doing Shulchan Aruch, we spent the last few nights learning about matzah, the blessing of matzah on Pesach. If I'll remind you from the beginning, there's a kind of food called pat haba b'kisnin. Pat haba b'kisnin is a type of bread which, because you eat it only for a snack or you eat it only not as a meal, it loses its status of hamotzi lechem min haaretz unless you eat it as your meal. And there are different definitions of what does it mean if you eat it as your meal. Maran famously understands that it's a minimum requirement of size that you eat. So you're eating four egg amounts of that food. So imagine if you're thinking about a good example. You're thinking about borekas. Why not? We'll use the example. I'm going to assume. The dough is a little different, but let's assume. You're eating this as a snack. But if you were to eat 4 of them, already it's no longer a snack according to Maran. According to Maran, that's already a meal. And because of that, you would have to do hamotzi and birkat hamazon. Now, when it comes to the Rama swings in 2 different directions. So if for you eating a little bit is considered a meal, then even if you eat a little bit, you must say hamotzi and birkat hamazon. According to the Rama, though, that even if you eat a lot, and for you that's not a meal, you're not coming dikboa seudato, so you have more flexibility on what is considered establishing a meal. And that's our first difference between Sefaradim and Ashkenazim. What are the types of food that Maran puts into this category of bread whose status is temporarily halted until you eat enough? The first man mentions is a type of bread that's a regular dough that is filled with nuts or sweets or other things that make it so that it's not your main bread. The second is a type of dough where you actually mix those ingredients into the dough itself. And there we had a machloket Maran Rama. Maran saying that it's already considered a pat haba b'kisnin if you could taste the flavor of those ingredients inside of the dough. And with the Rama saying that it's pat haba b'kisnin only if there's more honey or more sugar than there is actually flour. I mean, that becomes the main part of the dough, and that's when it becomes a borei min hamzonos. So again, there would be leniencies and stringencies both to Maran and the Rama, depending on how you interpret that sugya. And then third is some kind of cracker. It's a bread shekosesinoto, that you crunch it, a thin cracker that you crunch. Where Maran says that on face value in the beginning when you eat it, it's a borei min hamzonot and not a hamotzi, and that led us into a whole conversation. So is matzah really hamotzi, or does matzah fall into the category of pat haba b'kisnin? That again only applies according to those who are eating crunchy matzah. But those who are eating soft matzah, real matzah, there's no difference whether the matzah is before Pesach, on Pesach, after Pesach. Unlike the other acharonim who were discussing, well, for those who eat the crunchy matzot, maybe on Pesach it has a different blessing than after Pesach, and that's what we were spending our time dealing with in the last few shiurim. So last week, I had to call Harav Peretz for a number of different things, and I said, listen, Harav Peretz, if I'm already here with you, if it's okay with you, can I speak out some things on the sugya here in Kuf Samechet with you? And he was very happy to oblige, and Harav Peretz and I discussed his stance on matzah. If you look in the Shiviti learning forum, I was asked a while ago, what blessing Harav Peretz recites on matzah? And I said, Harav Peretz recites hamotzi lechem min haaretz on matzah. And that seems to go against everything that we learned here. That on crunchy matzot, even throughout the year, Harav Peretz recites on those matzot, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. And so I reached out to have a conversation about, after learning the sugya, after reading the acharonim that discuss this, even just from the Shulchan Aruch itself, it's an interesting conclusion to reach that matzah, which is crunchy, would have a hamotzi blessing, and I'll explain to you what he explained to me. But first, there was an interesting note he had on the machloket Maran Rama regarding the mizonot the cake, let's say, the honey cake, as an example. So, in a situation where you would make whole wheat honey rolls, so it's really a roll, you mean to eat it for bread, in the strict reading of halakha, you would find that Maran would say, well, since I can taste the honey, the blessing has to be mizonot and al michya. And Rama would say, well, since the honey is not more than the bread itself, meaning it's not so much. What were the words of the Rama? The words of the Rama, if you remember, on page 434, the Rama writes, "V'yesh omrim," and some say, "Sheze nikra pad gamur, elim ken yesh behem harbe tavlin udvash." This is only, it's real bread unless it has a lot of honey or spices, kiminei mitika, like the sweet foods shekurin lekach. Shekimat hadvash v'atavlin hemikar, that it's almost like the honey or the flavoring is the main ingredient in the bread. V'chen hagin, and this is the Ashkenazi custom. Halaperet said he wants to bring the two opinions a little closer. It doesn't make sense that they would argue so vehemently on this point. Maran says, I can even taste a little bit of honey, that's it, it's a mizonot. And the Rama saying, unless I'm eating honey in my bread, then it's not a mizonot yet. And the way he brings these two opinions, you should know this is unique. Tara Peretz is trying to find, yes, it's an argument, but let's not make it as severe of an argument as others would like to make it. And that is that according to Maran, you have to taste it in, if you're adding an ingredient to the bread, the assumption is going to taste it. You have to taste it in a way that it affects your flavor of the bread. It's this bread is really not bread anymore. This is really a honey cake. And the Rama, not exactly that it had, no, I'll say Maran better. It's not that you can taste that this bread is different. It's an egg challah, so now I can't make hamotzi. It's that this challah really loses its status of bread because I can taste the flavor in it. And the Rama, let's not say that it's a 51% in mixture of honey and 49% mixture of flour, but that it's a mixture of honey and flour, but you can no longer categorize this as bread, rather you can categorize this as honey cake. And that would be the difference there. Now when it comes to matzah, Haraperet said the real question is not on those who recite mizonot and matzah. The real question is, how on Pesach do you say hamotzi on these crackers? I mean, why on earth would you say a hamotzi on a cracker? Which other cracker do you eat that you recite hamotzi? And so, those say it's the bread for Pesach. Well, he says, really, people make hamotzi because they have no choice. It's the only matzah they have. They know matzah to be crunchy crackers. But really the question should not be on why matzah is hamotzi, but why do you consider mizonot bread to be matzah? Why did you make a cracker into your matzah? So, but nonetheless, it's the way of the world. That's the way people are eating. And he had an interesting understanding of pata b'kisnin. Pata b'kisnin means it's a hamotzi bread which loses its status not just because of the amount that you eat, but it's a hamotzi bread that loses its status because you are now kovea seudah. This is now my bread. This is my meal. Said, who eats matzah the same way they eat crackers? You take a cracker with some peanut butter. I don't know, a saltine. I don't eat crackers. You take some cheese and crackers. You eat them a little together. Someone gives you a tea with biscuits on the side. Fine. When you pull out the box of matzah, that's because you're eating lunch. You're eating dinner. That's your replacement for bread. There are people who have reached out. We eat matzah the whole year as our bread. This food, already when it's made, has lost its status of pata b'kisnin. Yes, it's a cracker. Yes, you shouldn't be eating it on Pesach. But it's a hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Could you argue for the minhag that Sephardim recite mizonot on it? Of course you could argue. There's much room in halakha to argue that. It might even be the simpler reading of the Shulchan Aruch. And when I asked Rabbi, does that mean all the crackers now we make a hamotzi? He says, no. This matzah, it is now considered a hamotzi because it's no longer bread. It's now pata b'kisnin. And so, I'm happy that I was able to clarify this point. It's not the same as that of Chamod Yosef, but it's important that I share that because it came up in a conversation mamash last week. And that seems to be what he writes here. Look on page 442. Let's read it again. ובמוצאי חג הפסח, okay. וכן מי שאוכל תמיד אך ורק מצה. If there's a person who always eats matzah, ואינו אוכל לחם אחר כלל, he doesn't eat any other bread. Now don't read it, any other bread in his whole life. This matzah is his bread. אף למנהג הספרדים מברך עליה המוציא וברכת המזון, אף בשאר ימות השנה. Even to the minhag of the Sfaradim, this person recites a hamotzi and berkat hamazon on this matzah the whole year, not just on Pesach. And that's what Kehillat is saying is relevant. We are all in that category of when you pull out the box of matzah, you go to Beit HaKnesset and people bring out matzot, it's because they ran out of rolls and that's what they're going to have Sudash Lishit with. That's no longer a snack. That's now hamotzi lechem min haaretz. And you have to ask, when's the last time? Oh, here, have a little corner of the matzah. It's a snack. It doesn't happen. People don't come in a bag of matzah chips and crunch on them. And that brings us to the next area of halakha. Let's do one more Seif Katan in the bottom, 443. Look where it says Chav Zayin. You see Chav Zayin? 443, Chav Zayin. Lechem shesh bo tzimukim. It's Rosh Hashanah time. And people have a minhag to add raisins to their challah. Why? Just to upset those people who don't like raisins. Especially the people who don't like raisins baked into their challah. I'm not talking about the raisin challah that I see around here. It's not our kids, but I see, the kids go to school, they put up pictures. It's a raisin challah mixed with cinnamon swirl and brown sugar and maple syrup, and then it's not a challah anymore, that's a pancake just in a bigger shape. Here it's regular bread, but they added raisins to it. Lechem shenatnu bo tzimukim, bread that they put raisins in. Umilvad tzimukim en ba'isa mitikut, but the bread is not flavored with sweetness aside from those raisins. Dino kelechem gamur, its status is bread. Umuvachim alav hamotzi u'berkat hamazon, and you recite hamotzi and berkat hamazon. Vehu hadin, and it's the same halakha. Im natnu bo chatichot batzal, if they put onions inside of the bread, like an onion roll. O shumshamin, or sumsamin, or sesame seeds, v'chayotze bezeh. Shumuvachim alav hamotzi u'berkat hamazon. So anything else, poppy seeds, sesame seed, onions, garlic, someone started us on a trend of adding bagel seasoning on top of the bread, fine. There's an Arabic spice you can buy that's like chopped up nuts and spices that you sprinkle on top of your challah when you bake it, fine. Zatar on a pita, fine. When we lived in the old city of Yerushalayim, there was an Arab bakery we used to go to buy our bread. For years, and it didn't have a hechsher. And people get upset. Our parents say, if you don't buy bread there, you're being motzi laz. You're saying that all of your ancestors who ate bread from Arabs, they were all eating tarif, and only you know better than them. Once had a rabbi from the Badatz telling our parents, what about the worms and the flour and the sifting and this and that? And our parents said that my ancestors and your ancestors all ate bread from goyim. The problem that you have of making all the generations of Jews look worse than you, that problem is much worse than the problem that you are imagining is going to be in the kashrut of the bread. So we used to go, the Arabs, they make a few different types of, the Arab bread in general, it's real bread. What do you mean real bread? It has no flavor. No flavor. When Chachamim talk about bread, they're referring to that. It's flour and water. Zehu. No, not even salt. Most of the bread doesn't have salt. You want to buy, in Israel, I remember when you go buy pitot, if you want salty pitot, you have to buy what they call Yemenite pitot. The Yemenites, I see the Yemenites are smart in all the places. Not just by pita. I remember by matzah, the Yemenites still put salt in the matzah, like the old Jews used to do. Maran doesn't like that minhag. But it makes things taste good. The same is true if you're familiar with tortillas, flour tortillas. There's a difference in a flour tortilla with no salt and a flour tortilla with just a pinch of salt inside. It's a different flavor. The same thing is true with the bread of the Arabs. So when you buy bread, pitot, let's say a bag of pitot by the Arabs, they give you, in the old city, they give you a little, it's a little piece of paper that's twisted on both ends, and you open it up and there's some green plants inside of there, and it's not what you think it is. It's zatar spice. It's a green spice with sesame seeds and salt and other things. They sell it to you, with the bread because they know that the bread doesn't taste like anything. And in order to eat the bread, you have to add flavoring. That's the reason why Chachamim required us to dip our bread in salt in the first place. So you don't eat pat chareva, you don't eat bread that has no flavor. Unless you want to eat bread that has no flavor. Remember over there, dipping your bread in salt is not a requirement unless you won't eat your bread without the salt. You want to eat your bread without salt? You're allowed to make a hamotzi without salt. People do it the whole week. The whole week, everyone makes a hamotzi without salt. Come Shabbat, they make a whole parade around the salt. Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimloch, they start doing all kinds of meditations. It's salt. The whole week, you make a Mayim Acharonim, they do the same thing. People, Mayim Acharonim, the whole week they don't wash Mayim Acharonim. Come Shabbat, Mayim Acharonim, Chova. They announce it's an obligation. They get up, they make people get at the table, they pass around cups. What happened today? Mayom Yomayim. Why? Shabbat you're obligated to Mayim Acharonim and on Friday, Thursday you're not? On Shabbat you have to dip your bread in salt, but on Wednesday you don't have to? There's a special book of halachot that only apply on Shabbat. So this bread which has no flavor, sometimes you can buy versions of it. What I'll do is, I'm making myself hungry. They take a pita dough. So imagine it's thick like a pita, but it doesn't have a pocket inside. It's a flat, but it's the shape of a pita. And they roll up the edges. So the edges has like a rim. And then they fill that whole middle of the pita while they're baking the bread. They fill it either with onions, fried onions, they put in there. And they put it in the oven. Or they take za'atar and salt and sesame and olive oil. And they mix it together and they smear the whole top of the pita. And they put it in the oven. 10 shekels. I cannot tell you how many times that was my lunch, that was my dinner, that was my breakfast. Just one pita with za'atar. The za'atar on the pita, the onions mixed into the dough, those things don't make the bread into mezonot. They're just hamotzi bread with extra flavoring. So now Maran is going to introduce us to a new halacha on page 443. Got out of my chair, make copies for the camera. Maran writes, Lachmaniyot. In modern Hebrew, we call lachmaniyot rolls, bread, small breads. Otan sheblilatan ava shekorin ovlias. Those breads which have a thick dough to them, it's a thick consistency of dough. And they call them, this is probably Spanish, but not a Spanish that I butchered. Lechem gamurhu. It is 100% bread. Umvarech alav hamotzi u'birkat hamazon. And you recite on this bread hamotzi u'birkat hamazon u'birkat hamazon v'otan sheblilatan raka. And those breads which their dough is raka, it's thin. Mevarech alehen boreh minei mezonot u'bracha achat mein shalosh. You recite mezonot and al hamichya afterwards. When you say a thin dough, let's imagine that one is a dough. So it's flour, it's water, you mix it, it has, you can pick it up, you put it down. Then there's a type of dough, think in your head the dough you make pancakes with. It's dough, it's a batter, better yet. It's a batter, you mix flour, water, eggs, whatever else, now forget the sugar. But just the fact that it's liquidy. I know that Ashkenazim might make blintzes like that, and some Sephardim might make mufleta like that. So this is a dough. It's a dough. It's going to make some form of bread, but that's soft and thin. This is mezonot and al michya. Vim kava'a sudato alehem. But if you made this your meal, you are now having dinner on pancakes, breakfast of pancakes. You see someone have a plate with 17 pancakes stacked on top with butter and maple syrup, and my friend, that's your breakfast, that's your lunch, it's your dinner. It's also a heart attack, but it's all of the things together. And if you eat it in the meal, but not because of the meal, we're going to define all these terms. Meaning, I'm eating this in the meal, whatever this food is. Let's call it a pancake for now. I'm eating it kind of like as a snack in my meal, but not because I'm hungry. It's not my bread for the meal. I'm eating it in the meal, yes, but it's not my bread for the meal. Ti'unim beracha lifnehem velo lacharehem. They require a mizonot blessing beforehand, but not afterwards. Not al michya, that will be included in your berkat mazon. This is an interesting halakha, because Maran will talk to us about the things that come in the meal, why we don't recite blessings on things that we eat after hamotzi, and that today perhaps there are things that you must recite blessings on after you say hamotzi, but I don't want to get ahead of myself until then. So if you bring one of these pancakes, you're going to eat it alone. As a snack, mizonot al michya. You're going to make this your meal, hamotzi, berkat mazon. If you're going to eat it in the meal just to spice up your meal a little bit, that is only a mizonot, but you have to say a mizonot even after you wash your hands, but you don't recite berkat mazon. Aval bat otam rikikim dakim. Remember those words, very thin crackers. Let's categorize them here as wafers. Shenotnim mirkachat alehem, that you put like a jelly, you put food on top of them. Hem tefelim legabehem mirkachat. They are tafel. We're going to learn this word. In every food mixture, there's an ikar and a tafel. Ikar means the main food. Tafel means the secondary food. If you want to find a word that is similar to tafel, remember the word batel or bitul. Normally, when something is tafel to an ikar, in many cases, the tafel food is batel. It's tafel. It's the same word, not in the same context. But the word tafel means that it's not important. It's almost lost in the main food. And therefore, says Maran, that because you eat these wafers, in order to hold whatever is on top of them, the food that's on top of the wafer is the main food. Uvirkat hamirkachat potartan. And the blessing on whatever is on top of that wafer is the blessing you recite, and you don't recite anything on the cracker. So, just off the top of my head, you can imagine there are weddings you go to. And in the weddings, they pass around pieces of meat or fish on very bland, not nice crackers, bland little pieces of dough. It's a thin wisp of dough that's meant to hold something on top of it. That is the main food. You recite a shakol on the meat, and that includes your wafer. It's meant to hold some, you see that sometimes they'll vegetables, so they'll put some avocado on there, and then they'll eat it. You have to make a ha'etz on the avocado, but on the wafer itself, you don't recite a bracha. If I'm not mistaken, this was an old machloket in halakha between Harav Yosef, alav shalom, and Harav Mazuz, may live and be well, regarding the blessing surrounding wafers. Wafers, you know, the kind that you get, you go to Israel to someone's house, they give you tea and they give you these wafers. It's very thin crackers with cream filling, lemon, vanilla, chocolate, whatever flavor they have. Harav Mazuz was of the opinion that the blessing on those wafers, I think I'm quoting him, if it's not him, it was somebody else, that the blessing on those wafers is shakol niyah b'dvaro. The reason? Because if you would take off the wafer part, just leave the cream, the wafer itself is bland, it has no flavor. Nobody's eating the wafer for the wafer. The wafer is there just to hold the cream. This is different, for example. Mishnah Berurah mentions such a case. This is different, let's say, than an Oreo cookie, a sandwich cookie. As kids, we overdosed on those things a lot. But a chocolate cookie with vanilla cream inside. If you take off the cookie part, it still tastes like a cookie. Yes, it has cream. But in that kind of situation, you wouldn't say that the cookie itself is tafel and the cream doesn't count. It's probably the other way around. But when it comes to the wafer, there is room for that chacham to say that the wafer is shakol ne'avivo. Now, did they agree with him? Not necessarily. But this is the origin of this halakha. Let's look through some interesting footnotes, because this is going to take us to a whole new world of conversations that we have not yet had before. On page 443 in the book in front of you, לחמניות שנעשו מעיסה עבה של קמח ומים. Rolls that were made, chavchet, rolls that were made from a thick mixture of flour and water. הרי הן לחם גמור, their bread, ומברכין עליהם המוציאו ברכת המזון. ואפילו אם נאפו על מחבת, even if you cook them, you bake them in a pan. So think about, some of you were trying this for matzot. We do this with lafas in my home, or tortillas, some people do. You have a griddle, a pan, you're not cooking it in the fire necessarily in the oven, but you're cooking it the way you'd cook a food, not bake a food. It's still bread. This is in the assumption that it's not made with a lot of oil. And they only put a little bit of oil so the dough doesn't stick to the pan. Today people use all kinds of non-stick pans, but here, the only reason you're adding oil is not to cook the dough as opposed to bake the dough, but so it doesn't stick. Now, are there fried doughs? Like a donut. I'm not talking about your donut. This is a Moroccan donut, a sphinge. So this donut is not sweet on its own. Most people don't make it sweet on its own. It's only sweet once you add sugar or honey or lemon honey onto it afterwards. So that, though, was not bread for the reason that it's not baked like bread. It's not maaseh. We're going to talk about this soon. And if it's made from a very thin dough, and they're very thin, you recite mezonot and al-nichya. And if you make this your meal, meaning you eat the 4 betzim we mentioned before, it changes to hamotzi b'kat hamazon. So far, nothing new. And I'm skipping. ואם כששופך מן העיסה הרכה על המחבת במקום רחב מתפשטת העיסה מסביב, if you pour a little bit of this batter in the middle of your frying pan and it spreads out to all the corners of your frying pan, meaning it is not thin, it's runny. כגון כמה מסוגי עיסת בלינצ'ס, או pancake, or crepe. None of those are Hebrew words. Blintzes dough, pancake dough, crepe dough, all of those. If they're that runny that they spread on their own as far as they can go, ברכתם מזונות ועל מחיה, אפילו אם אוכל ממנה כשיעור קביעות סעודה, it's a מזונות על מחיה, even if you eat 4 eggs amount. אבל אם אינה מתפשטת עד הקירה, וכגון שאופים אותה בתוך כלי סגור, ומתקבצת העיסה מתוך הכלי עד שנעשית עבה, אם קובע הסודו עליה, מברך המוציא בברכת המזון, but if it's not the type of, it's a thinner dough, but it doesn't spread that much, that's the type where, if it becomes your meal, it's hamotzi and b'kat hamazon. We're going to have to get practical examples of this. V'chol sheyesh, page 444, v'chol sheyesh safek b'davar. And in any situation where there's doubt, im ha'isa mitpashetet misaviv, if the batter is so runny that it just spreads on its own, tzarich lachmir shelo likboa sudo al pat kazo. You should be strict not to make this your meal. כדי שיוכל לברך מזונות ומן 3 בלי להיכנס ספק, so that you can always say מזונות without entering into a doubt. ואם רצה לקבוע סעודה עליה, צריך להחמיר לאוכל באמצע סעודה, אחר שברך המוציא על הפת, and if you don't know and you want to make this your meal, you should eat it as a meal that already has real bread. Ulinyan halachuch. This is a Yemenite bread. Oh, this is the bread that the Yemenites bake. I actually just had some in Israel. There's a Yemenite restaurant next to my in-laws' home. And it looks, I don't know how to explain it to you. It looks like a big pancake, but it's not sweet. It's a dough whose texture, whose consistency is very runny, it's very soft. And they pour it into a frying pan, a hot frying pan, until it bakes. It seems that you should recite mezonot al mechia. And only if it becomes your meal, you say hamotzi. This is only if it's made in a frying pan. But if you make it in an open kira, it's a type of oven where you make this bread, you would recite mezonot al mechia. You should do what you do above. If you're not sure, say the above. I don't know that I would jump on this matter just like this. Rather, I would say it would be wise for us to go ask people who are of Yemenite origin, who ate this bread their whole life, and ask them, what bracha did you recite on this bread? And if you want to dig around, so ask from the Yemenites that follow the Rambam, and ask from the Yemenites that follow Maran, and you'll get your answers over there. And if you don't have who to ask, so let's look in books, and we'll come to an answer. B'ezrat Hashem, I will do that research on my own, and come back to you with that information. There's an extensive amount of footnotes right here. Let's just do a little more. On page 449. So now, in the middle of a meal, do we recite mezonot or not? Look here on page 449. If you want to eat now in the middle of your meal one of the types of bread which is pat haba b'kisnin, ואין באותה פת הבא בקסנין את כל שלושת הדברים גם יחד שזכרו לאל, and that pat haba b'kisnin doesn't have all three requirements that we mentioned earlier. It has one, but not all three. You don't recite a blessing at all. You don't recite a first blessing nor an after blessing. And even if you're coming to eat it at the end of your meal, as your dessert, it's separate than your meal, you still don't recite a blessing on it. Okay, now I love these random contradictory statements, but one should be careful to only eat pat haba b'kisnin after their meal. And if you come to eat in the meal something that has all three of the things mentioned above, meaning it has check one. It is filled with nuts or fruits or something else. And, not or, and the dough itself is flavored to the point where you could taste the flavor. And it's crunchy. So not or, and. Ukegon, he gives you an example. Baklava. Baklawa. It's a sweet. I don't know how to even explain it. Baklava. There's someone here in our shiur who knows how to make it very well. It's a sweet food made out of dough, very thin dough, stuffed mostly with pistachios and honey and spices. If you get it from the Arabs, mamash with butter inside, something special. And then drizzled over with honey. In the newer places you see chocolate or other things, but that's not the original. Like the baklava we have now. So baklava has, it's very interesting. It's a sweetened dough, it's a stuffed dough, and it's thin and crunchy. אם הוא באמצע הסעודה, או קודם סילוק הסעודה, אין לברך עליו כלל. If he's in the beginning of the meal, or before the end of the meal, he doesn't say a bracha at all. ומכל מקום, nonetheless, כיוון שלדעת מרן השולחן ערוך צריך לברך מזונות על פת ובקזנית באמצע הסעודה, אף על פי שכלל גדול בידינו ספר ברכות להקל, אפילו נגד הוראת מרן השולחן ערוך, מכל מקום בוודאי שיראה שמיים בזהר שלו להיכנס עם הצורך זה, ולא יאכל מאותה הפת והבקזנית, אלא אחר בגן המזון. All of this halakha here is born from the inability of Sephardic Chachamim to rule like Maran. Let's read again Maran. Maran on page 443. If you have some kind of pata baba kisri in the middle of your meal, you recite the blessing mizonot before, but not afterwards. Now, are there those who argue? Yes, there are those who argue, which is why the author of this book has to jump through hoops of fire to make it seem like, well, you shouldn't and you can't, because their rule is to rule against Maran in a situation where other poskim rule against Maran. So let's just not do this because I don't agree with it in the first place. Let's end off tonight with one area of halakha. So, ugod dakot, thin cakes, shnotnin alehem merkachat shel perot, that you put jam, fruit jam on it. אם לא נעשו העוגות, אלא אך ורק כדי להחזיק את המרקחת של הפירות מעליהן, if the only reason these little crackers exist, these little cakes exist, in order to hold the jam on top of them, כדי שלא יטנף את ידיו כשנוגע במרקחת, so you don't get your hands dirty when you touch it, ואין לעוגות טעם וחשוב בפני עצמן. And these dough crackers or cakes have no taste on their own at all. יש לברך עליהן בברכת המרקחת ופותר בזה את העוגות. You recite the blessing on the jam and not on the cracker. אבל אם יש טעם וחשיבות לעוגות בפני עצמן, אף על פי שהמרקחת חשובה בעיני האוכל יותר מן העוגות, but if the crackers have taste, but really the thing on top of the cracker is more important to you than the cracker itself, מברך על העוגות מזונות ופותר את המרקחת שעליהן. You make a mizonot on the cracker, and that covers the fruit that's on top. וכל שכן אם נאפו העוגות בפני עצמן, especially if the cakes were made as cakes on their own. ולאחר מכן נתנו המרקחת עליהן. Only afterwards they added the jam on top. שמברך על העוגות ופותר את המרקחת. You recite a mizonot on the cake and you don't recite a blessing on the jam because that becomes a secondary ingredient. ונכון יותר. Okay, now he says it's better for you to separate the cooking. I can't deal with this. So, on page 450. ומכאן, from here, יש ללמוד, we should learn, שעוגות גבינה, that cheesecakes, עוגות פירות, or fruit cakes, העשויות משכבה עבה ביותר של גבינה או פירות, which, what is it? It's a thick layer of cheese, or fruit. ומתחת לגבינה או הפירות, יש שכבה דקה שעוגה ממין דגן. In the bottom of the cheesecake, there's a very thin crust there. כיוון שאף לדגן יש טעם וחשוב בפני עצמו, because the crust has taste and importance on its own, אף על פי שהוא תפל לגבינה או פירות, even though it's tafel, really in terms of how much and how little, there's more cheese or more fruit, that should be the main bracha, יש לברך עליהן בורא מיני מזונות, ופותר את הגבינה או את הפירות, ויאכל תחילה מן הדגן. And your mezonot covers the cheese of the fruit on top, but you should make sure to eat from the mezonot part of the cake on its own. If you really want, we can do next week a shiur on hilchot cheesecake. By the way, if it's up to me, all the cheesecakes will come without crust on them. Just the cheesecake part interests me. And I have an Eshet Chayil who just for me specially makes a pan of cheesecake with no crust. And it has nothing to do with healthy. The cheesecake will kill you just the same, with the crust, without the crust. It's just a matter of, I don't appreciate the little thing in the bottom. But if that biscuit, that cracker, has no taste, no importance on its own, it's only there to hold the stuff that's on top of it, so that you can hold the cheese with something, you can hold the food with something. You say the blessing of the cheese or the fruit and it covers the cake. ואם אכל תחילת הגבינה או המרקחת שעל העוגה, לבדם, or if you ate the cheese first, or the fruit first, on their own, וברך עליהן את הברכה הרואה עליהן, you said shakol or ha'etz on them, ואחר כך רוצה לאכול את העוגה בפני עצמה, and now you're coming just to eat the cracker on its own, now you have to recite a blessing on the cracker, because it's no longer there to hold what it is that you were eating before. ואם אכל הגבינה או המרקחת שעליה ביחד עם העוגה ובסוף אכילתו נשאר מעט מהעוגה ובא לאוכלה בפני עצמה, אינו מברך עליה. But if you eat the cheesecake together with the crust, and then you reach the end and there's a piece of crust, but there's no more cheesecake, you still just finish and you don't recite a separate blessing on that. B'tzat Hashem, we have, Monday, we'll take apart the question of eating an ice cream in an ice cream cone, or eating an ice cream sandwich. And most notoriously, the big wars, I know it sounds funny, the wars surrounding the bracha you make on a krembo. You know what a krembo is? So maybe I'll send you an article to research krembo on your own between now and then. I think you can buy crembos in San Diego. You shouldn't, but you can buy crembos in San Diego. A crembo, essentially, it's a little round cookie that's covered with a huge marshmallow fluff filling. Today they have vanilla, chocolate, marshmallow fluff, covered in a very thin layer of chocolate. So it looks like a cone. It looks, if you would flip this over and put a cookie at the bottom, marshmallow, and then coat it in chocolate, so you see just chocolate, that's a crembo. So really you're eating the marshmallow, then you eat the cream, then you eat the cookie. What bracha do you make? You don't eat it together with the cookie. Some people do, some people don't. What bracha do you say? A separate bracha on the cream, a second bracha on the cookie. And believe it or not, there are actual poskim who have sat down to argue about what bracha you recite on the krembo. Fun fact for you to know, that in Israel, the krembo is only sold from Sukkot until Pesach, and not from Pesach until Sukkot. I heard that the reason is that they simply can't, it's a very thin layer of chocolate. And they have a very hard time ensuring that it won't melt on a truck. It won't melt, they don't serve them in the fridge, they sit on the counter in the grocery store. Everyone knows, krembo season comes out, everyone runs to the store to get krembos. So they can't, possibly in the heat of Israel, make krembos last in the summer. And because of that, there's a krembo season. And the krembo season, when the weather gets a little cooler and the stores can leave them out on the counters and they won't melt in their boxes, I guess they're not worth enough to put in refrigerated trucks and send them around the country. Krembo is a very interesting food, and it has a lot to do with this question of, is the cookie there just to hold the cream? Or is the cookie there as its own food? Or are you eating the cream with the cookie and then you have cookie left and then it's a different situation? Well, B'ezrat Hashem, with that, we'll conclude that ice cream is the same thing. You have an ice cream and ice cream cone. So you eat the ice cream with the cone, but then at the end you finish ice cream, you still have a cone left. Maybe you'll tell me you don't make a bracha at the beginning on the cone, or maybe the bracha you make on the cone, or maybe you finish the cone and then you have ice cream left. All of those scenarios, B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to discuss next week. It should come to us in good health and happiness, B'ezrat Hashem.